Oi oi, it's your boy, Calvin Qatar, Jack Slack. And this is the Jack Slack podcast. And we've just been, well, not been to, but we've just had UFC in Qatar. It's an oil nation, also large reserves of natural gas, but an oil nation, which means they tried. There's actually been a couple of good fights on this card. Couple of meaningful ones. Actually, the main event wasn't that meaningful, but the co-main event actually mattered. And some interesting finishes, interesting fights. You got the return of Kyoji Horiguchi. It was a pretty good night of fights all around. And even better, it seems like Qatar is like an hour ahead of even the UAE, because this was done by 9 o'clock British time. So, Your Excellency, whoever's in charge over there, keep giving him the money. Keep pumping it to the UFC. I like your cards, mate. I like your time zone, mate, is what I really like. Main event, Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker. Arman Tsarukyan, we talked about this 100 times at this point, but this dude is the obvious number 2 lightweight in the world. No one's been arguing he's not. But he pulled out of a fight against Islam Makhachev and threw the whole event into chaos. And luckily, Moicano was preparing for a fight on that card and willing to step up, and Makhachev was willing to smash Moicano at short notice. He would have been well within his rights to not accept that fight. But the suspicion is that Surukian was going to miss weight and then claimed to be injured, and that is why the UFC seemed to be disproportionately angry at him. And if all you knew about Arman Tsarukyan was having watched his fights, you'd go, that's a damn shame. This is a miscarriage of justice that they're making him do community service by fighting Dan Hooker, who is much lower ranked, hates wrestlers, has won 2 fights in the last 4 years. And I say that as a Dan Hooker fan. But then you see any media appearance that Arman Tsarukyan has ever made, any social media appearance that Tsarukyan has ever made, and he comes across as a bit of a chode. He does this simultaneous thing where he goes, I'm rich, I don't have to care, but please give me the title fight. So he's kind of off-putting as a personality, but it is a shame because obviously him versus Islam was the best fight available. Him versus Topuria is the best fight available, unless you do Topuria versus Islam at welterweight, where Topuria, even if he beats Islam at welterweight, do you see 5'4" or whatever he is, Ilia Topuria fighting Shavkat Rakhmonov or Ian Gary? That's the state we're in at the moment. We got about 4 divisions on hold. But Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker, there were some interesting questions about this fight because Tsarukyan is short for the weight class and Dan Hooker is big for the weight class. Tsarukyan, in addition to being short, relies heavily on step-up left kicks, which are, it seems like it should be a long technique, but it's actually kind of short because you have to step your right foot up underneath you to begin with. Whereas if you're throwing a right leg kick, you're already planted on the furthest point forward, your left foot. And the left hook is his other big technique, and obviously left hooking with someone who's half a foot taller than you, bit tricky. However, he had the wrestling in his back pocket, and Dan Hooker's problem has been with the wrestling a lot of the time. Hooker does, however, have a great guillotine. Haven't seen it so much recently, but against Mark Jacasey, he forced Jacasey to shoot 3 times in 3 rounds. I think twice he had Jacasey roll to the bottom of mount to avoid being choked. And then the 3rd time he just strangled him outright. But they came out for this one, and Tsarukyan got to work in earnest. He threw like a 4-punch combination and a high kick. Dan Hooker grabbed the double collar tie, which, as we're always talking about with Islam Makhachev, and any guy that's taller than his opponents, grab that double collar tie because there is almost no punishment for doing it a lot of the time. And if the opponent ever forgets for an instant that you're going to try and knee them in the chin, you can knee them in the chin. And if they're focused on not being kneed in the chin and they're posturing up and desperately, as they should be, trying to not let you knee them, you can start turning over elbows, you can knee the body, you can start working for clinches. True clinches, as in chest to chest, you're getting thrown mate clinches. Go watch Makhachev versus Poirier, where he grabs the double collar tie. Dustin almost lifts him off the floor. In fact, he does lift him off the floor a couple of times by posturing up to avoid being kneed in the head. And Islam just lets go, drops underneath him, and grabs a body lock. Did the same thing to Moises. But Hooker's holding that double collar tie. He even pushes Tsarukyan onto the fence and searches for the knee. He skims in with one. It gets real close. And Surukian did something very interesting. He put his right hand on Dan Hooker's right hip, so across the path of both knees and pushing the hip back, which is a good way to stop the guy kneeing you, or to complicate him kneeing you. And then he eventually needed to make something happen, so he punched his right shoulder through and basically pulled Dan Hooker's arm across the front of his neck and gave up his back. And Hooker started running to his back and trying to choke him, and Tsarukyan just grabbed the leg and pulled him back in front of him. It was really interesting little technique. It was showing him something really good and then going, actually, no, sorry, now you're in front of me on the cage. I liked it because a lot of the time when people are looking to counter the double collar tie, they try to punch their own shoulder inside and swim their own hand through to get a collar tie. But he just put his hand on the hip instead and punched his shoulder through and basically like threatened himself with being choked, but wasn't in that much danger. Took him down, but was in a guillotine and did a roll. Looked up at the ceiling, went through, ended up on top that way. Rolling guillotine escapes, very useful if you're good at them. Think Conor McGregor versus Chad Mendes. Think Khabib versus Dustin Poirier. Ended up in the top of side control. Didn't do anything for a while. And then dropped some good elbows towards the end of the first round that left Dan pretty marked up. Second round, they came out. Hooker started throwing front kicks to the body. And I was talking about this on the pre-fight podcast, because the front kick to the body is such a double-edged sword. It's a real wrestler killer. It sucks to get kicked in the body with the ball of the foot a lot, or even a little, to be honest. And it wears on people quickly. But it's also something that if they parry it, they can catch it, and then you've given them their leg. So in Dan Hooker's fight with Mateusz Gamrot, a lot of his best moments came off hurting Gamrot with front kicks, but also 2 of Gamrot's 3 takedowns came off knocking front kicks across his body and then capitalizing on it. If you want a more extreme example, not a front kick, but a similar sort of example that's more extreme, is that John Jones, the first time he ever got taken down in the UFC, he was throwing a side kick at Alexander Gustafsson's, I think it was his lead leg, and Gustafsson batted it across him and then stepped in to try and take Jones down. And because Jones was completely out of position, he managed to succeed. Surukian ended up on a takedown again and again in a guillotine. And this time he was inside Hooker's guard. He wasn't on top of his shin. And he rolled with his back to the floor and his eyes to the ceiling inside Hooker's guard and came through up out of the guillotine. But in the middle, he was caught in a dragon sleeper, which is kind of a pro wrestling move, but also this used to appear in like the old SAS field manuals for how you silently kill a German sentry. You reach around the front of them and you just try and snap their fucking neck by leaning back. Pretty sketchy. I was like, sick guillotine escape, but you almost became the UFC's first fatality. But then, he ends up on top. And what I loved was he was in the top of closed guard, and Arman Tsarukyan is one of about 3 people right now who land elbows from the top of closed guard. And he was doing a great job of pinning Dan Hooker's hands. Anytime Dan Hooker held him behind the head, he just reached up, pushed Dan Hooker's hand off, and pushed it into the mat, which is real like modern guard passing stuff in the no-gi scene. Pinning people's hands is really important. But in MMA, of course, it gives you a big opening to try and hit them through. But when he pinned one of Hooker's hands, Hooker swam in a butterfly hook to start trying to get up. When you are in bottom closed guard, your legs are sort of shelved on top of their thighs in a very sort of homoerotic way. So to begin getting up, most of the time you want to get a foot or both feet in front of them. Butterfly hooks, knee shield, anything like that. And Hooker goes to do that, and Tsarukyan sprawls his hip over the leg and puts himself not further through the guard pass, but back into closed guard. And then he went back to elbowing and standing over Hooker. He stacked him up and elbowed him too. And it was just... He had Khamzat Chimaev in his corner, and I was just like, I hope he's watching this. Because, we'd just come off Khamzat doing no damage from top position, Makhachev doing no damage from top position, Shevchenko doing no damage from top position. Merab never does any damage from top position. Umar just had a performance against Mario Batista where he did no damage from any position. I love grappling. I love wrestling. But I feel like if you're on top of someone, you should be fucking hitting them. does my head in that you can win rounds on just sort of like being on top. Now, granted, the person on bottom should be going ham and trying to like elbow from the bottom to at least ask the judges to enforce the damage first scoring criteria that they're supposed to use. But I'm begging for the UFC to bring back knees to the head on the ground because that makes both people's jobs more interesting. If you just lay on someone in top side control or top half guard, they can bring their knee up and hit you in the head. And you don't have to lay on them because if you're desperately scared of unlocking your hands, that was Makaev's problem in the UFC. Never wanted to let go of his body lock. And if you're desperately scared to do that, you can still knee. If the knees are legal. But anyway, not tonight, because Tsarukyan was banging with elbows. He's one of the few people in MMA who still has good ground and pound. And he passed to Mount, pinned a hand to the floor. Really cool how he did this. He had his right hand on Dan Hooker's left hand, pinned it to the floor, turned his body to face that hand so that when he brought his elbow back, he could do like a, not downward elbow, but pulling the elbow in to the side of Dan Hooker's head. And then he pushed the other side down and he got the arm triangle because Dan Hooker brought his other arm into his head as he did it. Strong arm triangle finish. The arm triangle is an interesting one because the way that you finish it is to the way to finish it most powerfully is to dismount and walk around the guy. But it's also the only way that the opponent gets a chance to escape. Think of the Yuri Prochazka rolling over his own shoulder. Or Tex Johnson did it, I think, 2 or 3 times against Gordon Ryan, who is levels above Tex Johnson. But I remember watching someone earlier this year tap to an arm triangle in the UFC, and he pushed the opponent out of mount and off him. And people were going like, oh my God, what a bum. Didn't even know that pushing the opponent off him strengthens the arm triangle. It's like, no, that's the only way he's going to escape. If you watch modern competitors like Surukian did here, they will stay in mount and they'll drop one hip to the floor and they'll have the other leg draped over your body. So you can't roll. Or they might even do what Gilbert Burns and Linton Vassell do, which is they'll just swim a foot back inside the half guard. They'll put themselves in half guard just for the finish. So strong performance from Tsarukyan. He got a performance of the night bonus, so he gets his 50 grand extra that he doesn't need. But man, I just hope that they do the Topuria fight because whether you're going to do Topuria versus Makhachev down the road, it makes a ton of sense right now. It's a great fight. Might as well do it. Co-main was Ian Machado Gary versus Bilal Muhammad. Everyone's 2 least favourite welterweights who are very good. Ian Gary, every week I'm here going, just like Ian Gary did against Shavkat. And then I'll go, that Ian Gary, he is pretty good. Or just like Ian Gary did against Michael Page. That Ian Gary, he is quite good. And then every time we get to fight week and he just says weird shit in pressers. And I go, that's not going to win you any fans. However, Bilal one-upped him by saying he had a brilliant 17-year-old in his camp and that he's like Jeffrey Epstein but without the sex. And everyone went, come again, mate? Both men sort of negative charisma, but I was quite impressed with Machado Gary here. He looks very hard to take down, and he always has been. Shavkat, part of it is because Shavkat dominates people with upper body takedowns. When he went to Wonderboy's legs, I watched through his career, and that was the second time he attacked someone's legs in a professional MMA fight. All his takedowns are upper body. And when I say upper body, I mean upper body clinch and he trips the legs. It's not like Greco where you're not allowed to touch their legs at all. But he's a tripping, throwing guy. He's not a shooting guy. And Gary's judo background and his upper body clinch game really gave him trouble. And he ended up trying to grab legs and shit. But Bilal is much more, up, down, up, level change, try and lock hands for the double. And that works if he can shoot towards the fence. I mean, he did it to Leon Edwards, and he's done it to, I was going to say Diego Lima's the funniest one, because Diego Lima came out and just stood by the fence, like his brother does in every single fight. But Gary was using good footwork here to stay away from, you don't just want to stay away from the fence, you want to stay away from being on a straight line where if he comes in and you're not able to move out of the way, you just retreat. He pushes you into the fence. So you need a fair bit of space. You need to be inside that interior black line, basically. And he did a great job of that. And he pumped his jab, landed some good calf kicks. What I liked was, we were talking about this with Morales the other day, because he had the most extreme example of it I've ever seen, where he was in basically a wrestling stance to fight. He was head forward of his hips, hands in front of his chest. They were fists, but they were in front of his chest. And it's like, you are not set up to deal with striking, really. You are fully sprawl and brawl. You are not like, what if this guy shows me a couple of jabs and a right hand? But that's the intrigue of Morales. He's not a slick striker. He's a banger who can stop an amazing takedown. Ian Garry was doing a similar sort of thing here, where he was head forward, hips back, but able to move around a lot. He was still using his feet well. But it meant that if Bilal tried an easy shot, Garry could get his hips back or his head in front of him. And it also meant that he had this great, they were calling it, John Gooden was calling it the chassé basse. That's the Savat name for it. But the oblique kick, whatever you want to call it, that stomp to the front of the knee. Garry goes from hips back to pumping his hips forward as he throws it. And it looks like he gets it like twice as powerful as anyone else. I know the Jackson Wink people, they tend to sort of like slap the front of the top of the shin with just the foot. A lot of guys do that as sort of a distance finding thing. Or just to stop the guy from stepping in, just jam their knee a bit. But Garry was trying to take his leg off. Will say a couple of egregious eye pokes in this one. One of them, he was just trying to push away his face with both hands. But if you do that, it doesn't look like you're trying to do a punch. It just looks like you're putting your hands in their eyes. And, people got very angry about that. Rich Mitchell was the ref, so I thought you might actually get a point deduction because Rich Mitchell's generally pretty no-nonsense. I will always shout out, Rich Mitchell reffed a fight between Sylvester Miller and Jack Cartwright in Cage Warriors. Sylvester Miller is a almost dwarf who seems a bit special. And he's throwing this ground and pound from the top of guard where he comes up with his elbow and he drops his whole head down with it. And he keeps missing the elbow and headbutting the guy. And Rich Mitchell gives him about 4 warnings, takes a point, takes another point, and then disqualifies him. And this guy is just hilarious. He goes, Kurwa! He's Polish. But anyway, Rich did not take a point this time. I think a lot of people have said since this fight, it probably should have been a 5-rounder, especially when the main event was sort of, as much as I love Dan Hooker, this is the number 2 lightweight in the world versus a guy who, was he like number 12? If he is ranked, it's kind of been a bit of a surprise that he's ranked because his last 2 fights have been razor close split decisions. And he hasn't done an awful lot in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. He even tried to go down to featherweight briefly and got smoked by Arnold Allen in a fight which mainly seemed like, oh my God, how much did you deplete yourself to make featherweight? But yeah, this one should have been 5 rounds because aside from Morales, these are the 2 guys probably vying for the shot at Islam Makhachev. Unless Shavkat suddenly gets better and comes back. But I was saying this after the fight, people were going like, oh, Islam easily beats all these guys, I don't need to see it. And it's like, why are you talking yourself out of fights that could be interesting? His 2 hardest fights. 1, Volkanovski, his smallest opponent ever. 2, Dustin Poirier, who no one thought could wrestle. And then he smoked a load of guys who we thought would have a much better chance against him. Like, if you don't let the fights happen, if you just go, oh, I in my head he wins 99 times out of 100 in that matchup, it's like, bro, let's have the actual fight. I'd love to see him fight Ian Garry. I'd love to see him fight Shavkat. I'd love to see him fight Morales. Morales I think is a deeply flawed fighter, but I still think that's an interesting matchup. I'd even love Sean Brady, even though Sean Brady does sort of fall apart if he can't get his takedowns going, if he's forced to stand for any length of time. But I just think there's loads of interesting stuff going on in this weight class. And I think Garry probably deserves it more than Shavkat at this point because, yeah, Shavkat beat him, but Shavkat's been out for like a year and a half. And Gary's beaten 2 really tricky guys since then in Prates and Bilal Muhammad. And people are saying Prates deserves the title shot off the Leon Edwards win now. Volkan Ozdemir versus Alonzo Menifield. This was one of those ones where they were talking bollocks on the way in, going, Volkan Ozdemir says he's been working lots on combinations, blah, blah, blah. And I went, file that away in bollocks. And then he came out and he actually did throw loads of combinations. It was really interesting to watch. Got clipped with the counter left hook early, but kept Manfield on the back foot against the fence, kept him under pressure without getting wild. And then the combination he used to hurt him was right straight, stepping left uppercut, southpaw left knee to the chin. Left uppercut to left knee to the chin, or left uppercut to left knee generally to the head. One of those bizarre combinations where you've got two things coming through the same path, basically. And those are the combinations that kind of make the least sense, but they're also completely surprising. Like if you throw a right uppercut, left uppercut, in your head, there's like, why would his head be in the same spot if I just missed him with the right uppercut? But sometimes it happens, and sometimes it works. Another great one is spinning back fist into high kick, which is one that Sean O'Malley lands loads. He goes right spinning back fist, left high kick. Two strikes which come through the same part of the guard, but it often works because they block the back fist and they might be off balance from the back fist, or the back fist might pull their guard forward, or they might step backwards and get caught behind it by the kick. So going to be playing with that one. Right straight, shifting left uppercut, left knee. And then what he did was he stayed on him, throwing punches, and it was really pleasing to watch because he was fighting like Nick Diaz out there. He was throwing them sort of half power, but when they landed, it froze Manfield where he was moving his head, and the next one would land, and then the next one would land. Way more valuable to go to the guy's head with slower or less powerful shots than it is to swing hard and have a chance at hitting him. So that was good. You know, Volkanovski occasionally surprises me as a light heavyweight who's actually pretty technically decent, but then he'll lose to like Krylov, and you go, what the fuck was the point of that? Oralbai versus Hermanson. This was one of those ones where... Who was I talking about the other week? But I was just saying the part you can't avoid about this is that it's a sport. It's a combat sport. You can be the best defensive fighter in the world. You are going to get banged with something hard. You know, once your durability starts to go, it's very hard to hide. And you can do all sorts of things to get around it, particularly in this sport, because you can clinch up. You can become a grind defense fighter. People like Big Nog, his last few fights, he went towards that, even though that was never his game up to that point. And he had some success. But eventually, once the chin starts going, people are going to start landing on it. And I thought Hermanson was looking pretty sharp in this fight. He was covering high guard. He was jabbing and pulling away from the right hand in the same way he did against Joe Pyfer, where he was rolling it off or taking it on the shoulder. He was looking really sharp, and he was looking at where Oralbai was watching him. He could see the punches coming, and he was doing the double forearms high guard to land knees as Oralbai was coming in, because Oralbai was a good deal shorter, so he kneed him in the body, and he tried to knee him in the head too. Yeah, he was looking pretty good. He did keep getting backed up onto the fence, which is not ideal. But the punch that he gets laid out with, he has his double forearms up. It just slides down the side, and it doesn't even hit him flush. It's like bouncing down the side of his head. And I'm sure Oralbai is a great hitter, but Jack Hermanson used to be able to take shots from much bigger hitters than that. And, you know, take flush shots from decent hitters. Never been like the greatest chin in the world, but he was in there with big middleweights who could swing. And most of the time he was pretty good. He had the sort of Overeem thing where he'd get in his own head about people who were big hitters. So if you watch him against Thiago Santos, he just shits the bed. Jared Cannonier is another example where he just comes out and he doesn't know what to do. But then he'll fight other big hitters and look absolutely fine. I thought he was looking okay against Gregory Rodriguez until he got caught. And Rodriguez is pretty scary. So a sad one. I do like Oralbai, but like this is just, man, Jack Hermanson, hang him up, mate. If you saw in the week, the Cage Warriors welterweight champion flew out to Qatar and apparently spent all his money, like he spent the next 3 months' rent getting to Qatar to ask Dana White to let him have a fight and fill in for one of these guys when a fight fell through or someone missed weight. No one missed weight, but your best chance was this, because obviously the guy was a welterweight and Jack Hermanson is a middleweight who was coming down to welterweight for the first time in this fight. You know, you only needed to look at the size of him against Oralbai. oral buys are sometimes lightweight. Oral buys managed to pull a thing where 2 of his last 3 fights before this were catch weights at like 165. He is the only man who gets to fight in the 165 division that everyone wants. But yeah, Hermanson didn't miss weight. That Cage Warriors guy did not get a fight. He didn't even get to ask Dana White. He was like hanging out in the hotel, apparently looking for him. He went to Umar Nurmagomedov's presser, or like Q&A, to ask Dana White by asking a question to Umar Nurmagomedov. So it all worked out pretty badly. But yeah, Hermanson cutting to welterweight, that is not going to help your chin at all. Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Shamil Gaziev. Another crazy Waldo Cortez Acosta knockout. This dude has been so boring his entire UFC run. He's a jab and an incredible chin. And it's like he had that fight with Sergey Pavlovich where he could have won. Pavlovich couldn't like dent his chin, and Pavlovich is a massive hitter. And so he lost that decision and he went away and he was like, right, I'm swinging on people. And yeah, literally he goes to the fence against Ante Delia, comes back swinging his right hand and knocks him out. He got poked in the eye in that one as well. Goes back to the fence against Gaziev, swings his right hand, knocks him out. And they keep touting his baseball background. If he's a pitcher, this should be it. Just throw fucking fastballs the entire time. Just right hand, cover, right hand. Take it on the chin, right hand. Because he's got an incredible... Genuinely hate this dude for all the fights I had to watch before the Ante Delia one. But his chin is unbelievable. Kyoji Horiguchi versus Tagir Ulanbekov. This was really rewarding. I've been talking about Kyoji for ages because he's got a really interesting style, but ended up fighting Demetrius Johnson way, way, way too early. If you followed his first UFC run, his best win was Luis Gadineau, who you don't know. And then they threw him straight into the main event with Demetrius Johnson because they had no one for DJ to fight. And he looked fast on the feet, but he got taken down and mauled because he didn't really have much of a ground game. And then he moved to American Top Team. And he has been stellar ever since. His his anti-wrestling stuff. I mean, you didn't even need to watch this fight. Before this fight, he was wrestling against guys like Darian Caldwell. He fought Darian Caldwell in the ring and he wall walked on the ropes. He's very good at dealing with this shit. Back when the Jorge Masvidal thing was at full blast, they asked him who the best guy in the gym was, and he said Kyoji Horiguchi. He's got a crazy style. He used to be just swinging lead hand hooks, and then he started getting back into his sort of like point karate stuff. And now he's really he's adopted the calf kick, so he'll bounce in, bounce out, bounce in, bounce out, and then he'll bounce forward and then he'll throw the calf kick. So doing that bounce forward and then calf kick, he covers a huge amount of range. You would have to be like not in the ring with him for him to miss the calf kick. That's how he did in Kai Asakura in their rematch. But yeah, he's been around for years. I've been talking, he's the main reason that I talk about Rizin is that he used to have fights in Rizin. He was Rizin's one world-class fighter. He took a kickboxing match against Tenshin Nasukawa on, I thought it was New Year's Eve. No, it was like September 2018. And he did pretty decently in the first round. Like Tenshin Nasukawa had never had to deal with this weird-ass in-and-out karate style. But he took something like 9 or 10 fights over the course of 3 years in both Rizin and Bellator. He beat the Bellator bantamweight champion that was Darian Caldwell in the ring, and then he beat him again in the cage. And then 2 months later, he fought Kai Asakura and got knocked out. And that is basically Kai Asakura's most legitimate win. He took the best part of a year off, rematched Kai Asakura, and just blew him out of the water. But then he lost by surprise to Sergio Pettis, beat the piss out of him for 4 rounds and got back-fisted randomly. And then he fought Patchy Mix and got mauled because Patchy Mix is enormous at bantamweight. And just to backtrack, all of this was at bantamweight. Rizin, despite him being their biggest star, never introduced a flyweight division. Until much later when, 2023, he goes back to flyweight. So all of that stuff in the middle of his career where he was the bantamweight champion of both Bellator and Rizin was like an aside, not where he's best. Came back down to flyweight in his last few fights, beat Makoto Shinryu, who's a very promising Japanese fighter, Sergio Pettis, some guy who I've never heard of called Nasimulo Zulu, but he's kind of lost a step. We weren't expecting him to do great things here. gets in against Ulanbekov. I did say before this fight, like, be careful getting hyped for Ulanbekov because he's lumped in with Team Eagle, but he's not actually that good. He's won some sketchy decisions like the one over Alan Nascimento. But man, did he look massive in this fight. He looked like 6'3". He's billed at 5'8", and Kyoji's billed at, I think, 5'4". But I had to call my wife in and go, "Can you see this shit? Do you believe this shit?" You know, I was so angry about the height. So I was like, someone's lying. But man, kept the distance. When he stepped in, it was with powerful techniques. That jumping front kick with the lead leg to the body, that's new for him. The calf kick did a great damage in like a few good landings. The one that has always been the Koji Horiguchi special is the 1-2 weave. 1-2 weave down to the right. And he'll come out with the left hook sometimes, or he'll just clinch up. It's a great one to initiate grappling on your terms. It's a great one to stop people who are going to come back with a level change to try and wrestle you, because you go 1-2 and then you swing in and you get the underhook, or you get your head below theirs. When Ulanbekov got him down, he got up pretty comfortably, used the wall walk really well. He's very good at using the wall walk and actually catching guillotines that work or threaten the guy. He's kind of like Dustin Poirier if Dustin Poirier's stuff worked as well as he wants it to. If you watch the fight with Caldwell, I think the Caldwell fight in the ring is especially helped because he can pull Caldwell's head, like he can sit back and put it through the ropes. It's not like Caldwell's head's going to hit the fence when he tries to guillotine him. But this was a really weird card because Islam Makhachev was in the corner of both Tagir Ulanbekov and Segid Izagameyov, the guy who fought Nicholas Dalby. And both those fights, he has to come out between rounds and just looks really annoyed that they're not. It's like, I mean, it's got to be weird. If you're Islam Makhachev or Habib Nurmagomedov, you've got to be thinking like, why can't you just do the shit I do? Which is why, you know, great athletes don't always necessarily make the best coaches or teachers. But Ulanbekov came out for round 3 and Kyoji banged him with a left hook. Put him down, he got up, he head kicked him, and he finished with a rear naked choke. But man, what a comeback. I think he's probably still lost a step. I think we kind of missed the best chance for Koji Horiguchi to be a superstar for the UFC. You know, he is easily the best fighter Japan has ever produced. I'm not saying the greatest, because Sakuraba's accomplishments and the things that Sakuraba did, you know, he fought a heavyweight despite today he would probably be able to make middleweight. Kazushi Sakuraba is so important to the history of this sport. But Koji Horiguchi is the best fighter that Japan's ever produced by quite a long way. One of the best fighters in the world. But he's 34. You know, he was 24 when he got his really, really early title shot. I do think that I'm selling that as a bad thing because like he was clearly not ready for that title fight against one of the best fighters of all time. But equally, that's the fight that makes him go to American Top Team. And he had 3 more fights in the UFC. In his 3rd fight after the Demetrius Johnson fight, he meets Ali Bagautinov, who was number 3 in the world at the time. And he just dominates him. And then the UFC don't re-sign him. Rizin offer him something better, and he goes to Rizin from 2017 until 2023. And that, I think, is like the best of Koji Horiguchi. Real shame we missed out on it, but I hope he made a fortune. And this is something where the dominance of Alexandre Pantoja might play into Koji Horiguchi's chances of getting a title shot because 1, Koji just finished a dude. 2, that dude had Team Eagle hype, even though no one who's actually seen him thought he was that good. And 3, Pantoja needs challengers. We need more people for the Pantoja machine. It's kind of like the reason Koji got the fight with Demetrius Johnson in the first place was because they didn't have enough challengers or didn't have any new challengers. And they just rushed him into it. Them not having challenges for Pantoja might actually help him in the same way. But if Joshua Van wins, who knows? If Joshua Van wins a 5-round war, they might do Pantoja Van 2. What else was on this card? Luke Riley versus Bogdan Grad. This just is exactly how my 1-sentence preview of Luke Riley in the UFC was. I watched his last fight. He can't wrestle, but he survives and then he bangs. And literally, he lost the first round because he can't wrestle. And then he came out and just banged the dude out with a 1-2-3. Dalby versus Saigid Izagameyov was, I mean, it wasn't the most exciting fight in the world, but it was exciting when you consider that this guy is being touted highly He's another Team Eagle guy. They're like, oh, he was Makhachev's main training partner for JDM and so on. And Nicholas Dalby at 41, with a background in Kyokushin karate and being Danish, out-wrestled this dude. And the main interesting thing in this fight, technically, was that Izagameov went for the Malkoon, which is the head outside single against the cage. You put your foot to the cage between their legs, and you run the pipe, so you're throwing them over the leg. It's a trip and a running of the pipe. And Dalby grabbed the crotch lock, reached under the taint, locked his hands, and pulled Izagamev down and came up on his back. A counter to the unbeatable move. Where is Malkoon? Because he's done that to everyone, and I want to see him keep doing it. Asu Almabayev versus Alex Perez. This one's quite surprised me because Almabayev, my criticism is you're too small, mate, be bigger. But my criticism is he doesn't have any power. He's not a threat. And I think he did the best thing you can do if you don't have any power. He sold out on his punches, so anytime he missed his left hook, he spun around. He was really trying. And he put points into spinning kicks. If you hit like a little girl, work on your kicks because your legs are naturally going to be much heavier than your arms. I always say this about like women's MMA. Elbows, knees, kicks. Stop trying to box. Rough people up. And basically only Macy Barber has done that. But Almabayev shot a nice head outside single in round one. Alex Perez was he looked kind of windmilly to me. It worked really well against Nicolau, who I thought was a really smooth ring general. But in this one, he's just like running in, swinging, changing levels and missing most of the time. He did start wrestling and putting Almabayev on his back, which worked well. Almabayev hurt him with a back kick to the body in round two. And then he came out and threw a wheel kick, a spinning kick to the head, hurt him, swarmed in. Perez shot a bad takedown because he was hurt. And as he shot, Almabayev's forearm was already under his throat, jumped up, got the guillotine, got the finish. I do like Almabayev. He's game, he's scrappy. It's just that he's so undersized for the smallest division in the UFC, If they had atomweight, if they had strawweight, he'd be great. There was that one finish that was like a wheel kick off the bat into a rear naked choke between two guys with hard names to say, and that was, fine. Alex Topuria versus Bezkat Almakhan. I'd said I liked Almakhan coming into this fight because I'd seen him against Umar Nurmagomedov, and he was just a bit weird. Like, where most people would use their guard and try and get butterfly hooks and wrestle up that way, Almakhan would like let Umar get to mount or even like flat half guard and bridge onto his head and power up. And he did exactly the same thing against Topuria here. He got mounted in round one and just bridged on his head, turned over and came up. Bit of a weirdo, bit of a hoss. And then what I loved was that he was using a right uppercut to lead, which is normally like bad practice, but right uppercut followed by a jab or right uppercut followed by a left hook. Who does this? Willie Pep used to do this. In Muay Thai, Jean-Charles Skarbowski used to do this. Right uppercut, because they'll be standing upright, and then you poke him with the jab on the end of it. And he was doing that all fight. Occasionally he'd grab the double collar tie off it, but Topuria was like leaning back every time the uppercut came, and then Almakhan could just jump forward and try and jab him. Unfortunately, he got hurt pretty badly in the third round, and he got taken down a few times. Honestly, Topuria, I thought his striking looked really good against Colby Thickness, but I did not think he looked better on the feet here. Aside from the couple of punches that hurt Almakhan in round three, I thought Almakhan was giving him a really hard time. But I'm excited for him. I like what they do with their ring cutting, walking people into punches, using the context of the situation to land good punches, rather than just being like, oh, I go out there and swing. If you watch, Alexander does this too, but if you watch Ilya, it's just walking them towards the cage until they circle into the overhand or the right straight, depending on where their guard is. Which is, that's basically all Beterbiev does in boxing. It sounds very reductive when you put it like that, but it is so strong. And once you, if you consider like you land on their guard, you follow up with combinations, you attack the body, there's a lot of things you can do to build off it. It's more that if they're circling towards your right and you step in and swing a big right hand, there's not a lot they can do to punish you right then. They're mainly going to be covering up and defending themselves. Nani have knocked out Loda. Narilo Alev looked pretty good against Shaquem Rock. And then Denzel Freeman versus Marek Boljo. Two guys with all finishes on the regional scene. Two regional heavyweights against each other. Two guys who then had a slow kickboxing match at range. Now, I'm not saying that this was a work or anything, but betting on a decision in a heavyweight fight, if you were feeling pretty Bulgarian about it, you might do that. But they might just be really bad at MMA. I'm going to leave that there as like the more likely option. But the UFC, this is their answer to the criticism of how bad heavyweights got. They tried to sign some heavyweights, and it's like, no, there are no good heavyweights. They just aren't entering this sport because there's no potential. You got some serious work to do over years to try and get the heavyweight division looking good. And I don't think the UFC have the staying power to bother with that. Anyway, those were the fights this weekend. They were pretty good, I thought. Oh, Octagon was on, and what's his name? Felix Klinkhammer, who I've been meaning to do something about, but I was looking at sort of interesting prospects. Felix Klinkhammer, check this dude out. Strong grappler, trains at London Shoot Fighters. MVP is always in his corner. After like his second fight, he started fighting like MVP. I'm talking hands down, bouncing in and out, and he's just not as talented as MVP on the feet, but it makes for this really weird style, and he keeps winning by things like knee bar. We've got a week off the UFC this weekend, but we've got a load of other stuff going on, so I'll talk about that on the Boycast. Sign up to the Patreon to get in on the Boycast and all the extra stuff I do for the boys. Otherwise, I'll catch you next week. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Nicholas Dalby's snowballing dad strength bless.